For over a decade, Danielle Colby stood at the heart of American pickers, equal parts brains, backbone, and bold style. With her vibrant tattoos, rockabilly flair, and unwavering confidence, she became far more than just a supporting cast member. She became a symbol of strength and independence to millions of fans around the world. But behind the confident gaze and vintage heels, Danielle Colby was quietly fighting battles no one could see. Fans knew her as the fearless manager of antique archaeology, the sharp-tongued sidekick to Mike Wolfe, and a fierce advocate for all things antique and artistic. But what they didn't see were the sleepless nights, the private tears, the health scares, the abusive past, the emotional breakdowns, and the soul-crushing rumors that haunted her every step of the way. What started as a dream role on one of cable TV's biggest reality hits would, over time, push her body to the brink and her spirit to near collapse. She wasn't just dealing with a career shift or fan speculation. She was enduring physical pain so intense it left her bedridden, mental anguish that led to isolation. At her lowest, the world mourned a woman who was still very much alive, just too broken to be seen. In this video, we'll walk through the full arc of Danielle Colby's life, her conservative religious upbringing, the trauma she endured in silence, her escape into burlesque and self-expression, her rise to reality TV fame, and the deeply human struggles that followed: chronic illness, emotional collapse, public judgment, and ultimately, a quiet, painful rebirth. You may think you know Danielle Colby from American Pickers. But by the end of this story, you'll understand Danielle Colby, the survivor, the artist, the mother, the warrior. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see that some of the most tragic stories aren't the ones shouted from headlines, but whispered behind brave smiles. Danielle Colby was born on December 3, 1975, in Davenport, Iowa, a town nestled along the Mississippi River. Raised in a strict and conservative Jehovah's Witness household, Danielle's early environment was one of deep religious influence and moral boundaries. Her upbringing was structured, reserved, and somewhat limiting. An upbringing she would later describe as both formative and stifling. From a young age, Danielle felt like an outsider in her own world. The rules of her religious community often clashed with her creative spirit and innate desire for self-expression. Her vivid imagination, love of fashion, and expressive nature didn't quite align with the expectations of her upbringing. It was within this internal conflict that Danielle began to forge a path toward individuality. Growing up in that kind of religious atmosphere, I always felt like I was being forced into a mold I didn't fit into. I wanted more: freedom, art, life beyond what I was told was acceptable. Her eventual break from the Jehovah's Witness faith wasn't just a spiritual or ideological split, it was a seismic life change. It would mark the beginning of her journey to define herself on her own terms. Danielle's early passions were rooted in performance and art. As a teenager, she was drawn to the boldness of theatrical expression. Her early experiences in local theater gave her a taste for the stage, a place where she could be free to become anyone she wanted. But it wasn't until she discovered burlesque that everything changed. Burlesque for Danielle wasn't just an art form. It was a rebellion. It allowed her to challenge societal norms, reclaim femininity, and celebrate sensuality in a way that resonated deeply with her beliefs about body positivity and empowerment. Inspired by icons like Satan's Angel and Tempest Storm, Danielle began to view burlesque as both an artistic calling and a form of personal therapy. She would later form her own troupe, the Burlesque Lou Mustache, where she performed under the stage name Danny Diesel, a persona both fierce and fearless. Danny Diesel was my armor. She was the woman I wanted to be when I felt weak, bold, defiant, powerful. She founded Danny Diesel's Bump and Grind Academy in Chicago, a space where she trained other women in the art of burlesque, empowering them to celebrate their bodies and talents. For Danielle, it was never about provocation, it was about power and ownership. Behind the fierce exterior, Danielle's life has been riddled with real-world pain. In candid interviews, she has spoken openly about past abuse, including sexual trauma in her youth. She has described her early years as being marked by emotional instability and a constant search for safety. It's hard to talk about abuse, but I believe in facing it, owning it. That's how we heal. Danielle became a mother at a young age, giving birth to her first child, Memphis, and later to her son, Miles. Balancing motherhood with artistic pursuits was never easy. She often juggled multiple jobs to support her children, from waitressing and selling clothes to performing burlesque. During this time, she also experienced financial struggles that would follow her into her later career. Despite the chaos, Danielle remained committed to her values and to creating a loving, inclusive home for her children. She refused to let her past trauma define her or limit the future she envisioned. Perhaps the most fateful turn in Danielle's life was meeting Mike Wolfe, the future star of American Pickers. The two met in the early 2000s and quickly bonded over mutual love for vintage culture, antiques, and Americana. Danielle was especially drawn to the stories behind forgotten items, much like Mike. Mike saw in Danielle not just a friend, but a kindred spirit, a woman with unmatched style, grit, and personality. When he was putting together a pitch for what would become American Pickers, Mike insisted that Danielle be part of the show. She wasn't a picker in the traditional sense, but Mike knew her magnetic energy and unique aesthetic would resonate with viewers. Mike believed in me when I didn't even fully believe in myself. He saw something more, and he gave me a platform. American Pickers debuted in January 2010 on the History Channel, and it quickly became a cultural phenomenon. While Mike Wolf and Frank Fritz traveled across the country hunting for treasures, Danielle held down the fort at Antique Archaeology, managing the store, fielding leads, and keeping everything running behind the scenes. But her role evolved over time. Fans loved Danielle's tattoos, vintage pinup fashion, sharp wit, and fierce independence. She brought edge and depth to the show, a creative force who broke the mold of traditional female TV personalities. While her presence was often limited to the shop, her fan base grew rapidly. Viewers wanted more of Danielle, and she began making more frequent on-the-road appearances with Mike and Frank. Her blend of humor, business savvy, and emotional honesty made her a standout figure. Still, fame didn't come without complications. As American Pickers exploded into one of the History Channel's most successful and longest-running reality shows, Danielle Colby went from being a tattooed mystery behind the front desk to a beloved and iconic figure with her own fan following. But behind the show's polished treasure hunts and historical oddities lay a more complicated reality. A reality shaped by long filming hours, personal challenges, fractured friendships, and the strain of unexpected fame. When American Pickers first aired on January 18, 2010, viewers were instantly captivated by the show's unique premise. Mike Wolf and Frank Fritz traveling the backroads of America searching for vintage treasures, from gas station memorabilia to rare motorcycles. But it was Danielle Colby, the fierce and stylish office manager at Antique Archaeology, who grounded the show. Danielle didn't just manage the shop, she kept the show moving. She acted as a lead generator, finding potential picks for Mike and Frank, managing incoming calls, negotiating with sellers, and more importantly, providing a sharp-witted and creative balance to the often testosterone-fueled adventures. From the beginning, Danielle broke stereotypes. She was heavily tattooed, proudly wore vintage fashion, and didn't fit the mold of the typical female character in mainstream reality TV. She didn't need to be picked by anyone, she brought her own spotlight. I never tried to fit in. I brought my truth, my grit, and my style. If people loved it, great. If not, I wasn't going to change. Danielle's visual identity became one of the show's standout elements. Whether it was a leopard print dress, a Rosie the Riveter-inspired headscarf, or a fierce red lip, she embodied mid-century Americana with modern punk energy. But her style wasn't just for the cameras, it was deeply personal. Her extensive tattoo work told stories of survival, growth, and femininity. Every article of clothing she wore, often vintage or handmade, was a tribute to history and self-expression. Vintage fashion isn't just about looking cute. It's about honoring the women who came before me and wearing my strength. Her fashion background even led to her creating her own line of retro-inspired clothing, which further cemented her reputation as an artist, not just a TV personality. In the early seasons, Danielle primarily appeared behind the counter or on the phone, scouting leads for Mike and Frank. But as viewers responded positively to her sharp tongue, encyclopedic knowledge of vintage culture, and emotional honesty, she began to appear more frequently on the road. Fans adored her interactions with collectors. She wasn't just a sidekick, she could negotiate with the best of them, and her eye for vintage fashion, burlesque history, and unique items added fresh perspective to the show's aesthetic. In time, Danielle became more than the shop girl. She became the emotional heartbeat of the show. While American Pickers was a dream opportunity, Danielle was never fully prepared for the weight that came with reality television fame. Unlike many TV stars, Danielle hadn't sought out the limelight, it found her. And the price was steep. She often described her experience on American Pickers as a double-edged sword. While the show brought her financial stability, creative opportunity, and global recognition, it also invaded her privacy, opened the door to online harassment, and amplified emotional challenges she had been grappling with for years. People think you sign up for TV and it's all glitz and glam. But they don't see the hate messages, the invasive questions, the assumptions. I'm a human being, not a character. Danielle has endured cruel internet rumors, including false death hoaxes, body shaming, and criticism of her lifestyle and appearance. For someone with a trauma history and anxiety struggles, these attacks could be emotionally devastating. Despite it all, she used her platform to speak openly about mental health, boundaries, and healing. Topics rarely discussed by reality stars. Another burden of being on reality TV is the constant expectation to perform. Producers expected Danielle to be the sassy, vintage-loving powerhouse every day, but there were moments when she was exhausted, anxious, or even grieving. As seasons progressed, the long filming schedules and constant travel began to wear on her. She missed family milestones. She dealt with chronic fatigue, anxiety, and emotional burnout. But quitting wasn't an option. Too many people relied on her, including her children and staff at her businesses. I put on the smile when the cameras rolled, but there were days I cried in the bathroom before scenes. People don't see that. This was one of the hidden tragedies behind Danielle's success. She was slowly sacrificing her mental health for a life she didn't always enjoy. To fans, Danielle was the ultimate rock chick, fearless, stylish, always in control. But to those closest to her, she was a survivor still in recovery, someone who carried emotional scars not visible on TV. Over time, she became more vocal about the disconnect between public perception and private reality. In an interview with Burlesque Beat, she shared, "People think I'm bulletproof because I look strong. But I'm still healing. I still get triggered. I'm still figuring out how to be at peace." While millions saw Danielle Colby on American Pickers as the stylish, tattooed, no-nonsense office manager keeping Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz in check, few truly knew the woman behind the screen. Underneath the vintage makeup, burlesque flair, and television success, Danielle endured a series of deeply personal heartbreaks. Trials that would shape her understanding of love, identity, and emotional resilience. Danielle Colby married her first husband, Robert Strong, when she was in her early 20s. They had 2 children together, Memphis and Miles, and for a time, they lived what some would consider a traditional family life in the Midwest. But underneath the surface, cracks were forming. Danielle, by her own admission, was never wired for a conventional lifestyle. Her creative energy, progressive views, and defiance of conformity clashed with the norms of suburban marriage. As American Pickers grew in popularity, tensions between Danielle and Robert intensified. Fame brought opportunity, but it also brought increased time commitments, long filming schedules, and public attention, all of which strained their relationship. In a rare but candid interview, Danielle admitted, "Fame changes everything. Suddenly, the world sees you differently, and the people close to you do too. I was growing, but we were growing apart." Eventually, their marriage ended in divorce. While details remain largely private, it was a painful split that left Danielle emotionally exhausted and struggling to recalibrate her life as both a public figure and single mother. Despite the chaos of her rising fame and romantic turmoil, Danielle has always emphasized one identity above all others: mother. Her 2 children, Memphis and Miles, have been the emotional center of her life. While she kept them out of the public eye to protect their privacy, Danielle spoke often about how motherhood grounded her during the most difficult times. Raising her kids as a single parent while managing a demanding television schedule wasn't easy. There were missed birthdays, sleepless nights, and the constant guilt of not being able to do it all. But Danielle remained fiercely committed. "Being a mother is the one thing that has kept me going. No matter how dark things got, I had 2 little lights who needed me to show up." She instilled in her children the same values she fought for: independence, creativity, self-expression, and compassion. After her divorce from Robert Strong, Danielle eventually found love again. In 2015, she married Alexander de Meyer, a French graphic designer. At first, the relationship seemed like a fresh start. Alexander supported her artistic work, embraced her burlesque world, and helped her grow her brand. However, cracks in the relationship began to show over time. There were rumors of control issues, creative conflicts, and an overall mismatch in values. While Danielle didn't speak in detail about the causes of their split, she later acknowledged that the marriage ended shortly after it began. She described the breakup as quiet but heartbreaking, choosing to keep most of the details private for the sake of her emotional healing. "Sometimes, love isn't enough. And that's okay. It took me years to learn that walking away can be an act of self-love." One of the most painful revelations Danielle would later open up about was her experience with emotional abuse in past relationships. Not just romantic, but familial and professional as well. Though she never publicly named specific abusers, Danielle spoke about surviving gaslighting, manipulation, and toxic dynamics that deeply impacted her mental health. For years, she internalized blame, struggled with trust, and lived with chronic anxiety and depression. Her experiences led her to begin intensive therapy, which she credits for helping her understand trauma and set boundaries for the first time in her life. "I learned that survival wasn't enough. I wanted to thrive. And to do that, I had to heal. That meant setting boundaries, cutting ties, and facing myself." This healing journey was ongoing. But each step forward brought Danielle closer to the woman she was always meant to be: independent, self-aware, and whole. As she coped with the emotional wreckage of failed relationships and personal trauma, Danielle turned to what had always been her sanctuary: art. She revived her burlesque career under her stage name Danny Diesel, not just as a performer but as a teacher and curator of vintage culture. Her dance academy became a safe space for women of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds to reclaim their bodies and voices. Danielle also began painting and creating mixed media art, much of which reflected her personal battles. Her work often featured themes of resilience, feminine rage, heartbreak, and rebirth. Music, too, played a vital role. While not a singer herself, Danielle became a passionate supporter of underground and vintage music scenes, often promoting independent artists through her social platforms and business. Through creative expression, Danielle began to rebuild her identity. Not as a partner, not as a character on television, but as a full, multidimensional human being. Navigating heartbreak in private is one thing, doing it under the scrutiny of reality television fans is another. Danielle's social media presence became a platform where she balanced honesty and protection. She shared parts of her journey, trauma, therapy, struggles, but never all. She refused to commodify her pain for likes or sympathy. Yet, the public rarely respected that boundary. Fans often demanded explanations for everything from her romantic life to her body. Rumors spread quickly, including multiple false death reports, claims that she left American Pickers due to a secret scandal, or that she had gone off the rails. People forget I'm a human being. I'm not a storyline. I'm not a controversy. I'm a woman trying to survive, raise her kids, and maybe leave something beautiful behind. In recent years, Danielle has slowly reclaimed her narrative. Through blog posts, interviews, and vulnerable videos, she tells her story on her own terms, giving voice to millions who have walked similar paths of pain and healing. As American Pickers moved into its later seasons, fans were quick to notice something strange. Danielle Colby was absent from several episodes. Loyal viewers began flooding online forums with the same question: where's Danielle? Rumors swirled. Had she left the show for good? Was she sick? Had something tragic happened? Over time, these whispers mutated into damaging conspiracy theories and false headlines, including exaggerated tales of collapse, personal scandals, and even death hoaxes. But the truth was far more personal and heartbreaking in its own right. Behind Danielle's reduced screen time was a cocktail of health issues, emotional exhaustion, and an unspoken tragedy that nearly derailed her completely. By the time American Pickers reached season 21, Danielle's appearances became sporadic. In some episodes, she was seen only briefly at the shop. In others, she was completely absent. For a key cast member who had been with the show since its 2010 debut, this disappearance triggered widespread speculation. Danielle didn't immediately address her absence. She was still listed on the show's official credits, but viewers noticed that new cast members were taking up more screen time. The introduction of Mike Wolf's brother, Robbie Wolf, and other Pickers seemed to push Danielle further into the background. What most fans didn't know was that Danielle was facing a serious health crisis during this period. In 2021, she revealed in a private interview and later through social media that she had undergone emergency surgery for a uterine condition that caused chronic pain and fatigue. For years, Danielle had quietly lived with endometriosis, a painful disorder in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus. This condition affects millions of women, yet it remains one of the most misdiagnosed and underfunded health issues worldwide. I was filming a reality show with cameras in my face while bleeding, in pain, and barely able to stand some days. But I had to smile. I had to perform. Her decision to step away from filming for a while wasn't sudden. It was the result of years of pushing her body too hard, ignoring symptoms, and trying to meet the demands of a production schedule that left little room for healing. The surgery forced her to re-evaluate everything: her health, her identity, her career, and her limits. Danielle's physical health battles were closely tied to mental health struggles she'd faced since childhood. The trauma of past abuse, combined with the pressure of fame, eventually led to what she described as an emotional breakdown. In a raw blog post, she wrote, "I reached a point where I couldn't get out of bed. Not from pain alone, but from numbness. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to exist. I was tired of fighting for every breath." Danielle began therapy again, this time committing more deeply than ever before. She explored childhood trauma, the grief of divorce, and the invisible toll of being a strong woman all the time. It was only through this inner work that she started to find relief from the overwhelming darkness. She later advocated openly for mental health awareness, especially for women in the spotlight who are expected to stay resilient no matter what. We talk a lot about strength, but healing takes more strength than anyone knows. In 2021 and again in early 2023, false headlines began circulating online that Danielle Colby had died. Clickbait websites published fabricated obituaries with dramatic titles like Danielle Colby dead at 47, American Pickers fans mourn and tragedy strikes, star found lifeless in Iowa. These headlines spread rapidly across Facebook, Reddit and YouTube, causing panic among fans. Danielle eventually responded on Instagram, saying, "No, I'm not dead. Just resting and healing. Please stop spreading lies. It hurts more than you know." While Danielle tried to laugh off the absurdity of these stories, their emotional impact was real. The rumor affected her children, friends, and even business partners, some of whom feared the worst before verifying the truth. These hoaxes highlighted a dark side of celebrity culture, a disturbing eagerness to profit off someone's perceived downfall. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this period in Danielle's life was that while the world gossiped about why she disappeared, her body was breaking down. She suffered severe fatigue, autoimmune flare-ups, and debilitating pain, all while trying to maintain appearances. Behind the makeup and heels was a woman who could barely walk some days. People say I looked great on TV, but they didn't see the heating pads under the desk, the tears during lunch breaks, the painkillers before filming. In interviews, she admitted that she sacrificed her health for the show for far too long. And when she finally said no, fans thought she was being lazy or diva-like. The lack of compassion cut deep. Stepping away from American Pickers allowed Danielle to reconnect with herself. She moved part-time to Puerto Rico, where she focused on healing, creating art, and supporting local communities through activism. She restarted her burlesque school, resumed work on her clothing line, and began planning a memoir to tell her full story. For the first time in years, she felt peace. Give this video a thumbs up to show your support for Danielle and for sharing stories that matter. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos about the people behind the headlines. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. You'll get notified the moment we drop our next video.